Welcome, Dr. Ural, to the first annual Fatherhood Unity Month. Dr. Hill, I was so excited about getting this on the books, making sure that we were sharing the information, making sure that you had the full opportunity. So we're going to take this full time that we were going to take the hour, and we're going to push and make this happen. I am so glad to kick this off with you, my friend, my brother, fellow member, and you being a doctor of psychiatry, a movement in yourself. To me, I just really wanted people to really get to know Dr. Ural here. I think a lot of people don't understand how, what legacy looks like, and I really wanted to kick it off with you so we could share that information. We wanted to bring this to you, which is brought to you by CBMA, Campaign for Black Male Achievement, Good Fathers Only, and the Daddy Talk podcast. And we're going to be doing this all week. We're excited about tomorrow. We're excited about Wednesday with our town hall on literacy with Brother Chris Rutherford, Melvin Dakers, and Cindy Eggleston, right? Where we're going to really talk about how important fathers is to literacy. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, my friend and brother, Dr. Ural Hill of HOTEP Christian Services.
Amen. Well, I'm honored to be here today, Calvin. Certainly, we have come a long way since 2008. I credit my brother John Hill for introducing us. And I'll never forget, I was at Belle Isle watching the boat races, and he gave me your card. And from that day forward, once I called you, we made an automatic connection. He said, you got to call this guy. He's doing the same kind of thing that you're doing. And we connected, and we have been able to, throughout the last, so that's 2008, right? That was 2007. So 2007, that's 13 years, Calvin. So I'm excited about being here, and I'm excited about this whole piece of legacy. What does legacy mean? Passing down something to the next generation. And certainly we're at the age now, developmentally, where that's the most important thing. Being able to, generativity versus stagnation. Either you're passing down to the next generation or you're stuck. I'm just sharing some Erik Erikson developmentalism with you. I today saw my son, Chris, and I just wanted to tell him that I loved him. I saw his car outside his job. And I hadn't seen Chris since my former mother-in-law's funeral. And it was the most powerful thing. I thought, when I saw his car, it's like karma. And we're coming on this show. I said, boy, and he said, I love you too, Dad. And that just filled my heart with joy. And so I guess I can give a little introduction to myself. I don't know where you want to go first, or what do you want to do? Certainly legacy. I'd love to talk about my dad. And
that's exactly what I want you to do. Yes, sir.
Okay. So my dad, I'm a junior. My name is Ural Haywood Hill, and my father was Ural Hill Sr. They called me Ural Haywood. And my dad, his legacy, I can trace the history thanks to one of my cousins who did a history, a book on the history of the family, all the way back to the early 1800s. My dad's legacy starts with a Quaker. And isn't that something, a Quaker? And this Quaker and his name was John Mast. And he was born a Quaker in North Carolina and grew up in a Quaker family. And he decided he wanted to do something with his life. He left the Quakers and became a Methodist. And he moved from North Carolina to Nacogdoches, Texas. And he took a wife. And he started as a business there. It was actually a pub and a tavern and a hotel, John Mast. They were actually Quakers were of German descent. And then John had a son named Reuben Mast. And they were slave owners. And Reuben Mast, he was a lot like his dad in a lot of ways, but he fell in love with a slave girl. And he had a child with that slave girl. And that child's name was Charlie Mast. So Charlie grew up knowing that the slave owner, Reuben, was his father. And one of the slave girls was his mother. And so, and he was born a slave, but he had both in his, he was in that little mixed in generation that we don't talk about that much. So he worked the plantation. And the whole time he made the case that since that was his father, he owned part of that land. And they would kind of laugh at it. He continued to work and continued to work. And when, before freedom came, they actually gave him a piece of land. And he had a father named, and he married a woman. He married a Cherokee woman, all right? And they had a child named Charlie Hill. And they had a child named Louisa who married a man named Charlie Hill. And Charlie Hill and Louisa had 3 sons. And their names were Oppie, John, and Nib Hill. Oppie, John, and Nib. John Hill was my father's father. And they were in Texas. They were in what was it? Not Garfield, but they were in Gladewater, Texas. And so soon they moved from Gladewater to Atoka, Oklahoma. And that's where my father was born, Atoka, Oklahoma. Now, John Hill had 4 children, and my father was the second from the youngest. And Dad grew up there in Atoka, Oklahoma. And unfortunately, and this is, we're with good fathers only, and encourage me, I'm young. Unfortunately, when Dad was like 5 years old, his father died. And that brought hard times upon my grandmother. The oldest brother was 13. And my grandmother tried her best. She was both African-American and Native American. They were right off the reservation in Atoka, which is right above the Texas border. And she took them to an orphanage. She was going to give them up because it was really hard times and she couldn't feed them. And the oldest one, like I said, was 13. They couldn't work the land they had. And so the orphanage told her that they were going to split the children up. And when she found out they were going to split them up, because she thought she would leave them there for a while, get herself together and come back and get them. When she found out they were going to split them up, she brought them back home and she called her family members. So Nib Hill, my father's, uncle, he took my father and my aunt all the way down to Garrison, Texas. And he had a ranch and a farm and a business. And so Dad, at 5 years old, all the way up to 16, was raised on a ranch.
Wow.
And so he was a hardworking, country boy. And so Dad grew up on a ranch, and I can fast forward it as fast as you want me to. At 16, here we have, Dad was born in 1925. At 16, the World War II began. And Dad joined World War II. He was a great athlete in high school. He wanted to sign up for service. It was the war of all wars. They were fighting Adolf Hitler and the world was in a panic. And Dad signed up. And they sent him at 16 years old to the island of Okinawa. My grandmother signed off so he could go. And he became a demolition expert. Dad blew up airfields. He blew out territory in the forest to build airfields so American planes could land in Okinawa and have access to Japan. And so he earned the rank of staff sergeant while in there. And it really made a man out of him. I'm sure, he learned so much from my uncle and everything, but he saw the horrors of war at that time. And it was really challenging, but he fought hard, and, he worked with all those other Black soldiers that had come from the South. And by the time he came back, Grandma and the older son had moved to Detroit. And so when he came back, they said, don't come back to Atoka, come to Detroit. They have jobs up here. And so Dad came back from war and he came to Detroit and he settled here. And so now Dad was, around 20 years old. He started working in the factory and he worked at Ford in the foundry and he started school at Wayne State University. And he would go to school at night and work during the day. And he met my mom there. And, that's how I came to be. And of course, he also, there was a little twist in the story that I didn't share. Before he went away to war, he got married as a teenager and he had a son before he went away to war. That's my older brother. I have a half brother named Stephen Rayhill, who was born in Atoka. So, and this is where the story gets interesting in the sense of the kind of work that we do with mentoring with young men. So Dad left and he never got a divorce. He left, he came to Detroit, he went to work in the factory, he went to college and he met my mom. And he fell in love with my mom. And my mom found out that he was still married. And my mom said, well, she was a church girl. She said, I don't date married men. You're going to have to get a divorce. And my father told her, my father said, all right. And my mother actually paid for the divorce for my father to get the divorce. He got the divorce and they started their life together. Yeah. And so they started their life together. They got married in 1956. All right. And there's even a story on the other side. My dad was a smooth talker, Ural Hill Sr. And he was a pretty boy. I have a picture that I'll share so people can see what he looked like. Ultimately, my mother was dating a guy and really betrothed to be married. And when Dad asked her to go for a ride in this car that he and my uncle had, they were at Wayne State. My mother was an AKA, my uncle was a Kappa, and Dad asked, he said, can we go out? Can we? And she went and asked her boyfriend, can I go for a ride with the Hill boys? And he said, oh, sure, no problem. And they got in the car and Dad said, so who is D? And the mom said, D who? He said, the Negro that you going with. And she said, he's in pre-dentistry. And Dad said, I'm pre-med. He's a chemistry major. Dad said, I'm a chemistry major and a biology minor. And so he said, I may not be in first place, but I'm ahead of anything in second place. He said, stick with me and you'll never miss your mama. So he just swept my mother off her feet. That guy, I met that guy after both my parents died. That guy still followed my mother and father's life. And I actually met him when I was about 20-some years old. He walked into the store I was working in and said, I should have been your father. And when they both passed, he didn't come back around again. I just kind of looked at it weird. I found out who he was. When my mother passed, my father passed in 1994. And my mother passed in 2014, 20 years later. When my mother passed, he signed off on her obituary. And he signed in there, first love, first love. And I said, this is that same guy I met in my 20s. And he said, please call me. So I called him. And he told me the whole story and what his life had become. He had become a dentist and he'd gone into the Air Force. And he told me how much he loved my mom and everything. And he said, well, what kind of life did you have? And he actually married a white woman, by the way. That's another story. But the point I'm getting to is I told him what a life we had. And interestingly enough, when I was in Houston, he was actually living about 3 miles from where I lived. That was an interesting kind of dynamic. And I always tried to figure out why my mom wanted me to become a dentist when I was younger. But anyway, so here's what happened. My dad was a very hard worker, like I said, very enterprising. And one day they were living in an apartment over on Lawrence and 12th. in Detroit and working, and they had gotten married. They'd had a big wedding at Russell Street Baptist Church. My mother grew up a church girl, and on his way to work one morning, he would go to work early in the morning to the foundry. He noticed they were building a building outside the apartment, and he kept walking by, and he said, it looks like a gas station, and he had a mechanical skill, and he asked the guys that were, one time he saw a white guy walking around kind of surveying it. He said, who's going to be the owner of this gas station? They said, we don't have an owner. And Dad said, I'd like to be the owner. And the guy said, well, what do you have as collateral? He said, I got that 57 Chevy right over there. He said, really? He said, I'd like you, come back tomorrow. Dad came back the next day and he interviewed, and he found out he was a veteran, that he had a certification as a mechanic, that he was in college, and he fit the bill, and they sent him to school, and he became the owner of that gas station. He would always say, son, always ask. He asked, they sent him to Gulf Oil Training School, first black gas station owner in the city of Detroit, Ural Hill Sr. And I'll show you the picture. I'll pull it up so that everyone can see it. And so that started a legacy of hard work, and it started a real legacy of Dad. This is a picture of him. I hope that folks can see it. You see that?
Oh, yeah.
There it is.
Yeah,
I know it's got a heart. There he is. You can barely see it.
Yeah, there it is.
Right there. Okay.
He looked like John.
That's right. John looks just like my dad.
Yeah, John looked just like him.
Yeah. Well, John looks just like my dad. And so whatever the case, so Dad started with that gas station. And since he had grown up, like I said, he lost his father at an early age. He always took an interest in other young people. And so he started that gas station, then he opened another gas station. Then he opened on Dexter and Davidson. Then he got a station on Livernois and Davidson. Then he got a station on Puritan and over on Dexter and Puritan. And next thing you know, he had 5 gas stations. And he employed our family members throughout the family. And he was just rolling, man. He was really doing his thing. And he really did well. He became a millionaire in the 1960s. And he became a part of the city fathers in the city. So he rolled with Coleman Young and Charlie Primus. And there was a group of them. And they play cards and make decisions. And I just was so excited. And, they were all World War II vets. All had, Coleman was a Tuskegee Airman. And so I would get a chance to hear all these stories from Coleman Young and from Charlie Primus and all these guys. There was a group of them. And when he got the first station, he had to come up with some money. And his buddies came together and put some money together for him to get that station. And there was another guy. And so they raised us with all these other business folks and educators, because my mom became a teacher and she did the books. And so this small group, we think of Detroit sometimes as it is today. And, of course, by the 70s, Detroit had 1.5 million people. But in 1925, do you know there were only 15,000 blacks in Detroit? 15,000. It's a small group of people. And that over in Black Bottom. And that group continued to grow as more people came. Henry Ford he was hiring blacks. And so the Great Migration North really happened because Henry Ford, the word got out that if you went north to Detroit, he didn't care if you were black or white. If you could work that line, you could get a job. So all these blacks from the South, so Detroit really became up South. Detroit became people from South Carolina and Mississippi and Alabama and Oklahoma. And all these folks from the South came up. And so the numbers continued to grow and continue to grow. So now I can stop and take a pause there if you want to ask any questions or if you want me to continue to share.
Well, yeah, I think right there is the reason why I wanted to really kick this off with you, is because, one, the first black gas station owner, 5 gas stations, family employed to assist, and that process, had it not been for this idea of retirement and freedom, maybe we still have those things going, right? But my question to you is, with all that your father has done, how did that impact you?
Okay, well, the first thing, he kind of raised us like the military, man. He really, he really, he's spit and shine, hard work, good luck comes when you're working hard. He used a lot of military terminology with us. He was athletic. He played 3 sports. He played 3 sports, a scholarship at Wiley College before he came to Wayne State. And he loved sports. He hung around these. And so the first thing that influenced me was, one, you can do anything that you set your mind to do. And the other thing, see, your father is really your first hero, your first conscience, the voice in your head when you're running into challenges in life as a man that you hear. If you had a strong father, it's your father's voice. I could still hear almost. My dad's been gone for 24 years, and I'm 59. And when I'm facing something, I could still, not only can I hear my father's voice, but when I talk and I say something, like my brother looks like my father, I sound like my father and act like my father. So when I say something, I can hear my father talking through me. We become our dads if we really love our dad. So everything from how to walk, to how to talk, to how to dress, to how to approach life. Dad compared everything to an automobile. Dad had all these sayings, and my mom encouraged me. You encouraged me even more. I did a dedication in the front of the book, Let Us Make Men. And the biggest thing he influenced me in, and this comes later. So he has these gas stations. He has all these employees. Now let's move up to the 70s. That's going up through the 60s. In the 70s, Dad, he actually, he lost his businesses through the IRS, through taxes. And he lost all 5 stations. It didn't stop him, though. He went and got a liquor license and opened 2 bars. He opened he bought the Calumet Show Bar, and he bought the Largo Bar and Grill. And he got into the bar business. And he was doing pretty well at the bar business. And he, again, employed, family, and of course, these are my teenage years. I was born in 1960. And so I grew up watching guys play pool and, all of these different things around the bars. I drove through there a couple of days ago. And you know how I do when I drive through the hood. When I drive through the neighborhood, I went down 12th Street and looked at everything. And you know how I do that. And so whatever the case, hard work was the first thing I would say. My dad was always moving, and he never when he lost those businesses, it really hit him hard, and it hit his pride. But he turned around and got a liquor license and opened 2 more businesses. And then he opened up another station. And then my mother was an educator, and she moved up through the ranks from teacher to assistant principal to principal to Region 3 director she moved up to, when she retired, she was human resources director for the city of Detroit, for the Detroit Public Schools. She was deputy superintendent for human resources for the Detroit Public Schools. My mother said, talking about retirement, you said retirement. My mother said, well, all those businesses are great, but you're going to need retirement. We're going to need to retire. And she was a planner. She said, you need to get a job that's building up into the system, the retirement system, and get yourself a pension. So he started teaching in the Detroit Public Schools. He hadn't finished college. He went back to Western and got his college degree in his 40s and then started teaching. He started teaching at the Detroit Public Schools, at Cooley High School. These athletes, and Walter Jenkins was a former Detroit Lion, and all these schools, organized busing was beginning, and the neighborhoods were changing. It was changing from a white school to a mixed school, and then to a black school, and there was a lot of unrest. So they brought in Walter Jenkins to bring that school under control, a former Detroit Lion. And Walter Jenkins brought in a group of black teachers that were athletes that were good with kids. And my dad was over the auto shop. He put my dad over the auto shop at Cooley. And Dad loved the kids. He loved teaching young people. This is the biggest thing he influenced me in. He said, and Dad's saying was, find out what turns a kid's lights on. And when you find that out, keep that light on. What excites them, what makes them excited about, what makes them excited about life? What is their dream? And so his thing with the kids at Cooley. He would stay, you know, if I wanted to find my dad after school as a teenager, I went over to Cooley. And so I ended up growing up with not only kids from UAB High, but kids from Cooley High School. Because I would go over there, and if I wanted $20, Dad would say, that's an oil change. Go over and do that. Or see that car on that rack right there, go do an oil change. If I wanted $50, that's an oil change and a brake change. Go do that brake change. And he'd have me do work. So I'd be working with those other kids, learning how to do different things on the cars. And I learned how to drive a car over there and everything. And he began to develop a passion for teaching now. Now he was teaching, and he was still running his businesses. Well, he let the bars go, and he got another gas station with Shell Oil. The gas station, that's the one you know about, on 8 Mile in Wyoming, right over there in Royal Oak Township. Before that, Coney Island was a Coney Island.
Yes, sir.
That gas station. Right. And
yes,
he got to know everybody in Royal Oak Township, from the police chief to the mayor to everybody. He knew.
Oh, he knew my family.
Oh yeah. You know, the Staten family, all of them. He became a part of that community, and he was he worked from the morning to night. And he put some of my first jobs, he put me to work over there. So from this little room right here, I'm sitting outside my bedroom in a house I grew up in the 70s. Shoot, my dad would wake me up. He had me open the station in the summers. So at 7, I had to open the station at 7. I had to leave here at 6:30 in the morning. And that's when he would wake me up like the military, man. And he would come in my room, said, all right, I'm throwing out everything that ain't working, including you, if you ain't working. Get up and get over there and open that station. And so I learned the value of getting up early and going to work. And so I would watch him, and if you get a chance to be around your dad, he taught me how to make money, taught me how to do customer service, taught me how to serve. I was a gas station attendant. So I met all of those people he knew over there. They knew, that's Hill. That's Lil. They called me Lil Hill. That's Lil Hill. And so everywhere that's Lil. Yeah, I was Lil Hill. And so he taught me how to say yes, sir, and no, ma'am, when I was dealing with a customer. Hello, ma'am. How are you? Can I check your tires? Can I check your oil? All right. And can I check your air filter? He taught me how to sell. And at the end of the day, taught me how to count money and taught me how to work. One of the biggest goals of father is teach their son how to hunt, how to go make a living for yourself. And if you can make a living, you can make a life. And so now the young man that he was teaching at Cooley during the day, a lot of them would get jobs once they got the certification over at the gas station. And so they would work there in the evening. So he had a full staff, and a lot of them were former Cooley High graduates. And so we just had a good time. And that's through the 70s. And Dad continued to work and teach. Taught at Wayne County Community College, auto mechanics. He taught in the prisons. And this is where the story takes a turn. And this is back to the mentoring piece. So my older brother, I didn't grow up with, John and I grew up together under my mother's house.
Right.
Well, when Ray was angry that he never really got a chance to know his father. And he became a troubled kid in Atoka, Oklahoma. And Ray started stealing, and Ray got involved in criminal activity in Atoka. Just angry, as many kids are. Ray had the daddy wounds. Well, where's my father? Little country town. Right. Ray got up that the police told him that if he did not leave town, they were going to lock him up for a long time. So his mother sent him to Detroit to be with my dad. And my dad talked to my mother, and my dad used to always say, well, if I'd asked him to do something big, he said, well, I got to get that bill through Congress. Congress, my mother, she was tough.
Oh, no. So we lost Dr. Hill. Man, that's what I'll tell you about this. Oh, here he comes.
Okay, yeah. I'm back. Okay. Ultimately, my mother said, no, he cannot be in our household. I'm not going to have him influence this house. So my uncle took him in. Well, Ray wasn't at my uncle's for a year. He stole from my uncle, and my uncle put him on the street. And so Stephen Ray, my older brother, who's now 71, he then started rebelling up here in Detroit, and he went to a life of crime. And he started hustling. And when I say hustling, he was doing all kinds of things out there. It was interesting though. He got married, and he's still married to this day. We didn't see Ray for probably 7, 8 years. Okay, you want me to continue?
Yes, sir. You right here.
Okay. All right. Let me tell you the story. So let me get it right. When my father when he first came back, he gave Ray in the 60s. Let me get the story right, because Ray, I hope Ray sees this. Dad gave him jobs at the gas station. He worked at the gas station with my father. And even through the bar business in the 70s, he worked with my father in the bar business. All right. Are you with me?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But there was a time period in the early 70s where Ray was on the street. He got locked up, and they sent him to the Detroit House of Corrections. The Detroit House of Corrections. And my father was teaching at the Detroit House of Corrections, auto mechanics. Okay. We lose. I think God wants me to cut to the chase here. I think God wants me to cut to the chase. Let me cut to the chase. Ray signed up for my father's class at the Detroit House of Corrections, and he was working on getting his auto certification. And while he was there, his mother died while he was in prison. And my father did everything he could to get the warden to let him go home and go to his mother's funeral. And the warden would not let him go home. And that kind of broke Ray's heart. But it also turned Ray around. Ray got his certification in auto mechanics, and he came back to work for my father at the station on 8 Mile in Wyoming. And he never turned back. He maintained some real solid values that he had from his mother and his family as well. Although he had a life out there, he married one woman, and he's still married to her today, and has 5 powerful, very bright children that came out of that, and has about, I don't know how many grandchildren. But ultimately, Ray reconnected with a family. My dad didn't introduce me to Ray until I was 17. I got to know him at 8 Mile in Wyoming. And hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but the thing that Ray did, the dad did, he went back and took care of his own. All right, and he raised Ray, and he embraced Ray's children and his grandchildren. And so I got to know, and we became a bigger family. And Ray even developed respect and a relationship with my mom. My mom still had her boundaries and everything. But and so this was the legacy of Dad. He lived what he preached. There were countless young men at Cooley High School that got there that he helped. There were countless business people that he worked with. I can go anywhere, and if I say my name, and I'll tell you a story, my uncle, back when I was teaching at Texas Southern, I had never been to Garrison. I ended up going up to Atoka to see where my father was raised, and I had never been to Garrison. My uncle said, come down to Garrison, there's a big family gathering. And I went down to Garrison, and there was about 150 people of my relatives that I had never seen, that were relatives that grew up with my dad on that ranch, in and around that town. And they knew of my dad. I didn't understand why Dad loved horses and cattle so much until I found out he grew up on a ranch. He said, go up to the microphone and say your name, introduce yourself. Just do that. I went up and I said, "Hi, my name is Ural Hill." And across the group, everybody said, "Oh." And I said, "You know, what is that?" And they all started coming up to me and telling me stories about my dad. And so it's like a huge identity piece when, see, if you are a legacy, you're named after someone. When your name is spoken in, or they call the name of the next generation, that brings to mind all the things that the previous generation did, all right? And so when I said my name is Ural Hill, that brought all those memories they had of my father and all the things that he had done. And it opened my life up and found no matter how I went or wherever I went, my dad's legacy was there for me. I had a PhD in counseling psychology from Clark Atlanta University. And when I went to go to Clark Atlanta, I had finished seminary. I went to the Interdenominational Theological Center and got my Master of Divinity. And I went to Michigan for undergrad. But when I went to seminary to go to seminary at the ITC in 1988, the Holy Spirit moved me to go to Atlanta, go to Morehouse School of Religion at ITC. That same year, Dr. Thomas Cole and Brenda Hill Cole came to Atlanta to be the first president of Clark College and Atlanta University, joining Clark Atlanta University in '88. Those were my cousins. Brenda Hill Cole, you know, dad was a little bit older than them, and dad had helped them out when they were in college and they were students. And he said, "Go see your cousins." And they embraced me. So now I had family in Atlanta who embraced me. When I got ready to start the doctoral program at Clark Atlanta, I was actually starting a master's program. And my dad said, "Before you start second master's, go talk to your cousin, Thomas Cole." Now, mind you, when dad had all the gas stations and he was doing so well, and they were students, dad treated them well and treated to them to good times in Detroit and blessed them. And when I went to talk to my uncle, now I'm getting ready to start a second master's, and I go to see the president of the college, who happens to be my cousin through marriage. And he says, "Why would you get a second master's?" He said, "You should reapply to the college, go for your doctorate, your PhD." I never thought about getting a PhD. He said, "Getting a PhD will open doors that you don't even know exist." And I said, "Wow, okay." So I reapplied to the college and got accepted to the PhD program. And that changed my life. And then I was married, and I got 2 jobs on campus. My father blessed this guy, and this guy blessed me. And he really became a surrogate dad after my dad died. I got the chance to see the university from the inside of a president's eyes. Now, I caught the heck because when folks found out I was related to the president, they couldn't get to him to come after me sometimes. But I understood. But I got to understand what it means to be a president, right? You take the responsibility for things. And so you see the inside. So the legacy that my father left, one, it charted a path to always ask, and it also set, you know, my dissertation was on mentoring and the value of mentoring. Not only what I saw him do with my older brother, but all those kids at Cooley, those guys who came out of the Detroit House of Corrections, the kids that go at the Evoke Tech Center, the people who work for him. He taught me how to treat people, and he taught me humility too. He always had me working. He would have me working as a gas station attendant, or he'd say, "Go work for your uncle." And I worked for my uncle, and I would be a porter or a janitor. I worked as a janitor at Jeffersonian for a year, and then a doorman for my 4 years in college. He wanted me to see the value of hard work, no matter what it was. And then he challenged me to go further than he went. He said, "You can work with your hands, or you can work with your head. And I want you to go as far and as high as you can go." And when I got ready to sign up for the armed services, he talked me out of it. He said, "I fought in World War II, so you don't have to fight. All right?
That's right.
If you got a choice," he said, "Go back to school." And I kept going back to school.
That's right.
And then, of course, yeah. And so I have so many. I can talk about my dad forever because he spent quality time with me, taught me how to play basketball, taught me how to run, taught me how to fish, taught me how to ride a motorcycle, taught me how to fix a car, taught me, he would, like I said, he had these things, these sayings that he would say. He taught me about women. He taught me about life. And the older I got, when you're a teenager, you're the genius. The older you get, the smarter your parents seem to get, right?
That's right.
And by the time I was in my 40s, my dad was a genius to me because I was realizing how much he knew. And even though he might speak in street terms sometimes, when I went to seminary and started studying the Bible, my dad was preaching way long before I knew it. Because the stuff I was learning in the Bible, he was teaching me that stuff as a kid,
right,
and making it come right to the situation. So anyway, so that's my dad.
So that brings us to, with that being what it is, Doc, because that's the important piece. What the process, you being a doctor, we're looking at these times, right? Our whole thing is to celebrate, validate fatherhood in a way that has never been done. And so one of the questions I want to ask you is, how important is it for fathers to seek help mentally?
Okay, it's very important. See, the times that we're living in right now, I mean, we are in what we call a paradigm shift. We are in a paradigm shift, which means the social order is changing right before our very eyes. We're in a historical moment. The world, everything that we knew is changing, all right? We are watching a Black Lives Matter movement with 85% white people in the numbers. We've seen a movement where there was a movement with one voice in 100 cities simultaneously. We've never seen that before in America. We've seen a virus come through and take 1,400 people out of Detroit in 60 days and take over 100,000 people out of the US in 60 days, all right? We are in historical, almost biblical times. So right now, really, all of us have been traumatized. The nation has been traumatized. We've had a stay-at-home order that just lifted today. So everything that we knew has changed. And this movement to bring about change, to bring some equity and justice to the importance of the life of a Black male who was ultimately lynched, a week ago. He was lynched. And that has been going on ever since we set foot in this country. African-American males have been the brunt of the pain of this society, and females, really. But the males, they knew if they could try to break the males, and this has been done historically. If you look in the Bible, each time there's a savior coming, they went after, kill the first male child. They did, that's why they had to hide Jesus. That's why they hid Moses. Kill the first male child. So if you want to break up the family, take the males out. If we can have children with the women, then they will be complicit, they believe. Now, the interesting thing right now, the society has flipped. All the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement are women. and that's why I know that the U.S. government is in trouble because when the sisters are in charge, they represent wisdom and justice, and the sisters will not stop until they get something right. All right. So I'm just going to share this with you. Everything that we knew 50 years ago, including the number of two-parent households, including the order of society, has shifted. We've gone from having 78% African American families with two parents in it to 72% families with one parent. The new normal in the Black community is single parent homes. We have boys growing up without that crucial moment where their fathers give them those two talks, the talk about life and the talk about how to keep yourself safe and make money. All those conversations I just described to you, most boys just don't get that unless they get it from a coach or unless a dad is very persistent and maintains a really good relationship with the mother of his children. That doesn't happen. That's not often, that you can maintain all of that. They might get it from a coach. They probably won't get it from a teacher because only 2% of of teachers are Black males. 80% of the kids in public schools are children of color, and only and only 2% of the teachers are Black males. So my point is, to answer your question, why do Black males, how can they use mental health help? I believe that in a time where everything is changing, it's always good to get some professional advice. How do you make sense of the fact that you have children that you don't see on a daily basis, that you can't take your legacy and train them in how to hunt and how to, the importance of school and the importance of reading, and complicate that with, we're just coming out of a time period where 50% of the prison system was African-American males, and a time period where there are four things that a lot of males, a large percentage of our males, right now 50% of African-American males drop out of high school as we speak across the country. An average of 50%. Only 50% of, all right, 90% of those kids who don't finish high school will end up in the prison system, or tied on paper, tied to a prison system or a state system or a federal system. Most of them won't get a high school diploma, which will cut off their ability, many of their ability to get married, to have a family, all right? The number one provider of mental health services is the prison system. And it's not, they don't provide effective mental health service. They just give them an assessment when they come in, prescribe some pills if they need them, and then they give them an assessment 3 months before they go out. But if I got a letter from a guy from prison last week who wants to go through counseling. He's been in for 30 years since he was 17. And so these four that happen, first thing that happens to a Black male in this society, we have a lot of pain. First thing that happens is alienation. If you're growing up and your dad's not there, and if your mom is not positive about who your father is, and not only let him around, when you look at what you're supposed to be when you grow up, you don't have it. So you don't know. Alienated. And if there's no pathway, you don't know.
You don't know.
And if nobody teaches you how to hunt legitimately, you will go with the mouth that are around you. So you're alienated, and you see on television, I'm supposed to have this, this, and this. So you'll listen to little baby this, little baby that, and how you're supposed to get stuff. And that's the manhood training. Or if your father's locked up, you'll see that's the pathway to manhood. And a lot of these kids actually think this. The second thing after alienation is criminalization. You will be criminalized if you drop out of high school. That 50% that drop out, they start taking to get the things they want to impress these girls and do what normal boys want, nice clothes and a car and all those things that my dad provided for me, and just say, go to school. Your job is to go to school. Let me go out here and hustle. They don't have that. They might even be breadwinners in their homes. So they get criminalized. Now, once they get criminalized, and up until now, they realize that they could not do that to white people. They will do it to each other, because the crime against going out to West Bloomfield or Oakland County and committing a crime, where they have a lot of resources, is twice the crime. They'll put you under the jail for doing that up until, we're going through this paradigm shift. But now they're cannibalized. It turns them on each other, all right? So then after that, after cannibalization is incarceration. Now when you get incarceration, now you're on paper. Now that's going to limit you for the rest of your life if you're an adult. I worked as a delinquency services worker for the state of Michigan for juveniles who were 12 to 21 who were wards of the state and committed crimes against the state for several years, Department of Children and Family Services for the state of Michigan. And our job was to turn them around before they got to 21. So if they committed crimes, our job was to turn them around and help guide them, like the staircase you see behind me, back up the staircase. And we had funding from the state to send them to college or whatever they wanted to do. Still wasn't easy. But the point is, African American males, from the time we came to this country until now, have been targets. We have been victims of violence, and then we were blamed with being the perpetrators of violence from the time slavery existed. And we know that story. And it's continuing today through institutionalized racism, which is a mental illness. Really, the sane are insane in an insane society. Racism is a mental illness. So we need, who really needs some mental health help is from the White House on down, these white nationalists and these white supremacists who think that inherently that
well, like you said,
perpetrators.
I think what you said was true. We all need it. This is why I kind of put it on fathers, right? Because it's fathers, right? These are fathers who are perpetuating these crimes. Like you said, even when you in your description, the dropout rate, fatherless, the crime rate, fatherless, incarceration rate, fatherless, right? When we get into these L's, like 43% of U.S. children live without their father, fatherless, right? Then when you take it, the test, when you were talking about the confusion, there is a man, I'm in the house with a man that we don't even act like there's no duplication, there's something wrong about this picture, right? And we bought into the system, 1965. I talk about this all the time. Then the juvenile system, right? 1965. So when they hit us in 1965 with the Welfare Act, you got hit again with the Juvenile Act. So they knew that this is what they were going after. What they didn't expect, Doc, was that all that damage would cause fathers to become, now black fathers are the most involved father, would cause fathers to step up even more. The brother that was just killed, George Floyd, there's a picture of him in the car with his daughter. He was a father. And because we say that again?
I saw that picture.
Right? So because we have not, because people like myself, John, who's on the call, and the many people that will see this video, fatherhood, right, to me, and I have been preaching this since 2008, you have to have healthy fatherhood, right? And what you said was true. We all, we could say white nationalists, right? We could say drug dealer. We could say your man up in the White House. You could say that we all need some kind of mental health training because we all have these conditions of division that caused us to act this way. It's in our DNA. It's in the processes. It's in the policies and the laws that kept us, that kept you over here and kept you over here. Where you hear a young man, here's one, Doc. You hear a young man say, man, I'll never forget, my son went through a situation at Farmington Harrison. And they found cocaine, pills, weed, right? Money in the guy's locker. He was suspended 5 games from playing football. Anybody else, the kids knew if that was me, I was going to jail. Right? Anybody else, that's what the kids say. Yeah, if that was us, I said, that's what you have to change. See, you're not infiltrated into the courts. See, he could make the call, they could go to the court, and they can brush it to the side. You have to be infiltrated in the system. So when they bring that case to the court, it's Dr. Hill is sitting there, Judge Dr. Hill is sitting there, and he can say, give this young man another chance. And
Let
what
me,
has happened is, go ahead.
I was going, when I remember when my dad, I got my first traffic ticket. And because I had my dad in my home, my dad took me down to the judge's quarters. The judge just happened to be, he took me down to Judge Lou Simmons into the judge's quarters and sat me down and had the judge talk to me. And the judge shared with me that he talked to me about tickets. He talked to me about the legal system. I looked at all the books I had. I was in the, and he said, I'm going to help you with this ticket. All right. He said, the next time you're going to have to pay for it. And he gave me a lesson. Now, what if I didn't have a dad?
Yeah.
What if I went down and I was down there with a tie on and a jacket, because my dad told me how to dress, told me what to expect, and connected me to those folks. My dad sent me to UAD High School, right? Now, I didn't know when he sent me. I said, why you want me to go to UAD, Dad? He said, I want you to be with the black coats. I didn't know what the black coats were. Later on, when I got the job with the state of Michigan and I was a delinquency services worker, I remember being before a judge representing a kid. 3 of the judges went to UAD High School. These were old white guys that went to UAD. And I remember this judge, the first day I presented, I didn't really know how to write the letter to present my case. And he reamed me. You know how a judge can talk about you. He got loud. He said, if you ever come in my courtroom with some mess like this, and he was talking to me so bad, I went home and called my mother. I was like, no. He never talked to me, not that hard. Right? But I went home, and the next day I went in, and we talked. I met him in his chamber. I said, well, would you tell me how to do this? And he told me, and we talked. He said, you went to UAD High School? He took me under his wing, and I became the best writer of those letters down there at the court. By the time it finished 3 years later, when I stepped him in the courtroom, the defense would rest, okay? Because I went, oh, you're a Cub. You went to UAD? Oh, my God. Now I knew what my father was telling me about, the black coats, you know? And so you want that. See, okay, when you have 2 parents in a home, the father is the role model for the son and the love object daughter. The mother is the role model for the daughter and the love object for the son. The boy looks up to the dad in a traditional home. I'm not talking about, 21st century all the time, but traditional home. The boy looks up to the dad and wants to be like him. It's the mother. And then she looks to the father and says, I want a guy like him. And the boy learns how he should be treated by a woman by watching how his mother treats his father. And he learns how to treat a woman by how he sees his father treat his mother. Her father treats her mother and how he treats her like a little princess. Can you take the father out of that situation? And now all you have left is the mom trying to do both and trying to work 2 jobs. And if she's angry that the father is not there, if he's behind on child support, or if he's not paying it at all, or if he did something, now you got the boy coming up and she wants, and many times he's got to be little man before his time. 12, yeah. 13, he's little man. He man, right?
Yeah.
And now he's got to, he's out here selling water or selling stuff or hustling, trying to bring in, you give me some money to help me pay these bills. And now he's taking on responsibility. He really doesn't know how to do it. And every time, if you just like your raggedy daddy, now his self-esteem is hit. And if he's in school and he's trying to hustle and he doesn't have that positive self-esteem, now he doesn't feel like he fits in. He's not worth two red cents, and he might drop out of school.
Well, yeah, because the school system want him to drop out.
Well, see, and that's the thing. Dr. Jawanza Kajufu has an excellent series that he wrote in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, still valid today. countering the conspiracy to destroy Black boys. And I wrote about it in my book, Let Us Make Men. I highlight that. By the time a boy gets to be 9 to 11 years old, around, 4th or 5th grade, in that stage, he determines whether or not he fits or not. Eric Erickson says that's the stage of industry, all right? Industry versus basically doubt. In industry, he learns that he can compete with the other kids. He gets, if he's lifted up in the classroom, he fits in. He's competing and learning how to socialize. If he doesn't meet that stage of industry, of the early school years, he starts to say, well, I don't fit in here. One, I don't see anybody who looks like me, Black males in here. 2, I may not be functioning as well. 3, if I don't have both those parents in the home, I'm not getting exposed to the same things that a lot of these other kids are. I'm not getting exposed to the same amount of positivity, the same amount of stability, the same amount of uplift, the same amount of hope. I may be getting wisdom from mama and hard work, and I may have a super mom. There's some super moms, a whole bunch of super sisters out here who are doing both and raise kids well. And she may be enterprising enough to incorporate coaches and pastors and deacons and teachers into that, that framework. There's some moms out here who know how to do that. And that's really what my book, Let Us Make Men, was about, to try to get them to see that mentoring, that, if you don't have a husband there, because that's just the reality for us today, don't feel ashamed. There's some brothers out there that can help you out. There's mentors that can help. And if you're dating someone, make sure that you're modeling the behavior that will help that young man see how men and women interact. And if you have some strong brothers or your father around, let them be a part of that boy's life, all right? And if you can be positive about their biological father, you can't lift your sons up by tearing their father down. If they can learn those lessons about how kids shape in their stages of development, then they can come up and be fully shaped and make it through. I don't think, in this moment that we're in, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about institutionalized racism as it is. If we didn't talk about tests in the state of Texas in 3rd grade to determine how many prison cells to make when they get to be 18. How many prison cells were targeted? How many prison cells will we need based on the test scores of the 3rd graders in the state of Texas? If we didn't talk about the fact that there was a conspiracy to destroy Black boys long before 1900, from the time we set foot in this country, the fact the inferiority of Blacks versus whites in this country that was falsely set up. Let me just set the tone. In America, the word Black was never used to describe a group of people. Etymologists, language specialists cannot find the word Black to describe a race of people until the year 1600. In 1615 is when chattel slavery started in America, when they first landed in Jamestown and began to bring chattel slaves here. They developed the whole language around this economic system of injustice to place Blacks in slavery for their whole lives. Slavery existed before then, but it was never based on the color of one's skin. They tried to enslave the Indians, the Native Americans, but they were too proud to work on the plantations, and they refused to do the work. They would rather die than work the land that God gave them here in America, and they knew the territory so well. So they devised a plan to bring Africans here, and they said, if we devise this plan to create a working class of people and we get free labor, that they'll work for us and they'll have to work generation after generation and never be free. That created, and we'll call them Black and we'll be white. That's where we will always be able to find them. And everything Black will be negative and everything white will be positive. And generations and generations of Blacks will not know their own history, their own language. They will not know their own greatness. They will believe us and feel like whatever we told them, that their history started in slavery. So our kids starting in the school systems don't learn about Africa before slavery. They start with American history. all right? And they learn about blacks being enslaved. They don't learn that we came up with modern civilization. They don't learn about the woman standing in front of the criminal justice system being an Egyptian goddess named Ma'at, holding the scales of justice. They don't learn that they borrowed, that the reason there's a pyramid on the dollar bill is because they borrowed the wisdom to create our civilization from Egyptians who were black. They don't learn that the Jesus who walked the earth was a Negro, was a black man, all right? That there was a man of color who looked like them with woolly hair and brown skin.
Well, you sure can tell how they treated him.
Well, see, that's how we knew that he was ours when we came here. Because they put him on the cross and they put us on the cross. The lynching tree for us is the same cross they put Jesus on. So black mothers who watched their sons be lynched, just like George Floyd, can identify with the Virgin Mary who watched her son put on a cross and sat at the foot of the cross. So white folks learned about the cross by studying about Jesus. Black folks learned about Jesus by being put on the cross. So when they said, we're going to bring you this religion, and most of us in America came from West Africa. And Jesus was in East Africa and Holy Land in East Africa, in Egypt, that area. We came from West Africa. And when we looked and we saw that there were 400 locations in the Bible, 400 locations in the Bible were in Africa. And we saw that the Garden of Eden was in Africa. And then we saw Jesus's journey, that it wasn't the oppression that they brought the Bible to us with, slaves follow your masters, but that Jesus said, I came to set the oppressed free. And we saw how Jesus ran them out the temple. And we saw how Jesus was like us, only a brother. You know, when he ran them out of the money changers out of the temple with the whip, you know what Jesus told the Pharisees?
What did he tell them, Doc?
He said, look, they said, who gives you the authority to run us out the temple? He scared them all out. He was 30 years old. He said, I tell you what, destroy this temple and I'll rebuild it in 3 days. And they said, 3 days? It took us 42 years to build that temple. They thought he was talking about the building. You know, he was a brother because he was like, bring it. He was talking about his body. He said, you can kill my body, but you can't kill my soul. I'll be back in 3 days. So he was giving us the vision of what his mission was. It was not only to bring us salvation, but it was to say, don't fear, because they may kill your body, but they can't kill your soul. There's eternal life. I go to prepare a place for you. Give your body as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, for that is your reasonable service. He was redefining things for us. So only a black man would say, bring it, bring it. What are you going to do? Come on. I'll be back in 3 days. So anyway, my point to you is this. He was talking about resurrection. And so through that resurrection, and that's why, to answer your question, why do black men need to utilize, and black fathers need to utilize mental health services? I would say the number one thing is because we left the church. Our hope, and our hope in the resurrection and our mental health was really built upon our life in the church. Black men in droves have left the church. And that was our mental health session every Sunday. And that was our place where we got lifted up. That was a place where we were somebody when we came into that church. We may be on the plantation or picking cotton, or we might be working and sweating with dirt all on. But when we stepped up to the church on Sunday, we were deacon so-and-so. We were reverend so-and-so. We were Mr. So-and-so. We put on our Sunday best. And those hours we were in the church, the pastor did everything he did to give us a 3-hour break from hell, to give us hope, to rebuild our minds by the renewing of our minds. And then we left. The brothers, at a certain point, we left the church in droves. The church now is full of women, old folks, and kids, all right? Just like the families.
It was the same thing. It was the same thing. A lot of men left the church because of the rules and the people that was the different laws and oppression within the churches, the different denominations. It's so you want me to bow down to this pastor? He a man just like me. But it turns out the pastor was, so you got a lot of people running behind the pulpit talking about they was called. So here we come, a bunch of false, fake claim, doing the same thing as the oppressor. So that became an issue for a lot of men. And that's why men look at ministry the way they do, is because of the men who was in charge didn't paint a proper picture for ministry. Therefore, fatherhood was under attack even in the church. Because when you go to church, Doc, they weren't preaching how important fathers were. They was preaching our Father and then got their collection plate, but they wasn't preaching how important fathers were. So the manipulation began. We moved them out the way. They began to act like the oppressor. We moved them out the way, and now we slide in the woman who now, yes, she's going to tithe. She's going to come consistently. She's going to pray. And the man is saying, this guy, because we forget, like Dr. Miles Monroe say, we forget that God put the wisdom in men. So the man can see some things that the woman can't.
Well, I want to challenge you on that. I hear you loud and clear, and it's always important, just like when these paradigm shifts occur, it's always important to be very careful in leadership, because when you put us in leadership, we have a tendency to do the same things that the oppressors did to us. So when you talk about church leadership, I mean, let's look at it. What do we hear right now? What's the big battle cry in Detroit about the protesters? You watch any press conference, what do you hear? What you hear is outsiders are coming into our town and tearing up our town. Outsiders. What did they say about Dr. King and those? Oh, we got some good niggers here. These outsiders, rabble-rousing Negroes coming in and messing everything up for us. That's what Bull Connor and them said. Now here we got a black police chief, and we got black leadership saying, these outsiders coming into our town, if you're not from Detroit. But, and they're missing, now granted, they're right about people coming in to destroy. They got intelligence on a certain small group. But we have to watch when we get in power. See, power corrupts, and man has been corrupt. The first murder was Cain and Abel. That's sin. We battle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities and rulers of wickedness in high places. So Jesus came after 2,000 years out of Egypt and all of that. They bring him out of Egypt 2,000 years ago, and he runs the leaders of the church of that time out. Blah, 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 blah. Said, you've turned my father's house into a den of thieves. That's 2,000 years ago Jesus did that. And then he preaches for 3 years, and he tells us two things. He said, love the Lord with all your heart and mind and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. He said, the body is the temple, not the building. Don't put all your money in the building where moth and rust consume. He said, I don't want you to come and bring your tithe and go out and sin. There's no such thing as cheap grace. He said, whoops, I'm sorry. I got me to preaching here. He said, you are the temple of God. Now, what did COVID-19 do? It ran all the money changers out the temple. All of a sudden, nobody got a church. Can't nobody go. Are you hearing me, man? And then we realized that we were the church again. What COVID-19 did, just like the plagues, was empty the churches out. So we realized the church is the people. It's not the building. So it leveled the playing field. It made the fools wise, and it brought the high low. So I don't care how many bishops you are or how big your church is. Now you got to go online like everybody else and talk to the people, because everybody had to stay at home. It had us thinking, you know what? The most important ministry is not the music ministry and the entertainment anymore. Most important, you got to feed the poor. Jesus said, I came to preach the good news to the poor. When's the last time you heard a Democratic or Republican candidate talk about the poor?
About poverty.
He said,
God bless you.
I came to give sight to the blind. We, just like the Pharisees of Jesus' time, we thought Kwame would get out. He got in there, and we put him in there, and he fell victim to the seat of power too. The morality didn't change. If you get outside the 10 Commandments, you are on your own in this world. The good that I would do, I do not do, says Paul. But the evil that I would not do, I do. But this other thing Paul said, but I strive for the mark for the prize of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Jesus came to tell us, I want you to give your will to God. And I'm going to leave you with the Holy Ghost. I came to save you. You're saved. But I want you to turn your life for battle. This paradigm shift, you got people moving like we haven't seen them move. They didn't even move like this in the 60s. When they had a movement, we're going to go to Birmingham, we're going to have a mass meeting, and we're going to go to Birmingham. We're going to Selma now. Now we're going to Birmingham. They had 100 cities at the same time with the same message. Black, white, poor, rich, old, young.
Well, yeah, Doc.
Gay, everybody.
Everybody.
And now listen, I don't want you to throw the black women out, because the black women are running this thing. And
no, I'm not.
And listen to me. When you go through the Bible and you look at wisdom, I'm going to close with this. Well, I won't close with it because we're talking about fathers. You see, Solomon, when God asked him, what do you want? See, David fell, just like men fall. David fell to Bathsheba. And David saw this woman and saw how she was, and his flesh got to him. And he was the greatest king up until that time. And Jesus came through his line, and David had sex with her and got Uriah killed, put him in the front lines of battle and got him killed. I'm going biblical with you. So God forgave him because he went humbly and repented. He repented. He was humble enough to repent, but he wouldn't let him rebuild the temple. Solomon comes along, and Solomon was his son. The son, actually, the next son of that particular parent. When God asked Solomon, what do you want? Solomon says, I want wisdom. So he became the wise king. And Solomon connected with the queen of Sheba, who was the queen of Ethiopia. And she came to him for his wisdom. You're talking about men, the importance of men and wisdom. She came because she heard that he had great wisdom. And we've had prophets who had great wisdom. You know, greatest of these is Jesus, the Son of God, had great wisdom. Jesus left us with something that gives us wisdom, whether you're male or female. You know, when we speak of wisdom biblically, it always says wisdom she. When you go through Proverbs, it says, son, listen to my wisdom. Listen to what I'm sharing with you. It says, wrap your heart in wisdom. She will protect you. Wisdom is a spirit. When we look at, you know, the woman that stands in front of the courts, all right? If you see the statue in front of most criminal courts, and it has a woman blindfolded up scales, the scales of justice. Have you ever seen that? Lady Justice?
Yeah, you talked about it earlier.
Right. Lady Justice is Ma'at. Ma'at. In the Egyptian mystery system, every, you know, they have these attributes to God, these gods and goddesses. This goddess was the goddess of wisdom. The American criminal justice system borrowed her from Egypt. She was wisdom, peace, harmony, joy, and love. She represented the one who stood at the gates of heaven at the end of a person's life. And on that scale she held blindfolded. They always had a male and a female, like Isis, Osiris, and Horus. The deities, the gods, had male and female. So her husband and her were at the gates, her and Tahuti. And he would reach in at the end of your life, he'd reach into your chest and pull out your soul and put it on that scale on one side. And on the other side, he would put a feather. And then as your heart, your soul had to be lighter than a feather as you recited these 43 maxims of Egyptian wisdom, these negative confessions. And they were, I have not polluted the water. I have not stolen the children's food. I have not eavesdropped. I have not lied. I have not committed adultery. What do those sound like?
Of course, you know, there's the 10 Commandments. So,
Right.
Right.
I'm saying that to you to say that woman, wisdom is a woman, all right? Wisdom is a woman. I'm saying that. At the same time, there's a balance that goes in. There's a balance that goes in of men and women. There are things a man can do that a woman might never do. There are things that a woman can do that a man might never do, like bear children, all right? We fit together like a glove. And the raising sons really is the job of the man to raise a son, to be a man. It is hard for a man to be a man until his father says, son, you are a man. Because life will do things that will shake you to your very boots, especially a black man in America. And we need the fathers to tell their sons that they're a man. Now, I'll leave you with this last model, the Jews. The Jews, bar mitzvah. At 12 years old, a Jewish boy knows that he's a man. From 10 to 12, he has to study the law. The first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Leviticus. He has to study those 5 books. And he has to learn Hebrew. And he has to learn the years old. And at 12, he has to show and prove in front of his whole community of Jewish people, his whole temple, that he understands Hebrew and he could speak the language of his people, which identifies his identity. And he knows their history, and he knows what it takes to be a man. He knows the law. And then he is considered a man. The girls go through training that the women take them through. Have you ever seen the jail full of Jewish boys?
Of course. Of course.
You haven't seen the jails full of. You haven't seen the jails full of Jewish boys.
You don't see that. You don't see that because of the very thing that you said. That fatherhood is a very, very important piece. That fatherhood is no let up. And I want to get there because we'll go all night, me and you, and I want to wrap this up real quick.
We're almost at it. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
start.
So it's, and we'll pick it back up when we get Paul on the following Monday, but it's Malachi 4:6. Turning the hearts of the children to the Father, turning the hearts of the fathers to the children. We celebrate fatherhood today. At the beginning of the month, we celebrate your dad. We celebrate all the fathers, raising the value of fatherhood. That was clear in this conversation on what we need to get to, where we need to go, and what we can't forget. Our tagline is kids need both parents. So yes, there is wisdom in the woman. It's very important that we get back to, on the other side, like you said, it did a complete flip from 70%, to 78% single parent home, double parent home to single parent home. And policy still in place. And we still talking about one thing and we ignoring these policies, and it's constantly causing these problems. But fathers, if we raise the value on fathers, maybe young men will want to be better fathers and be fathers that value legacy, which is the reason why I chose you. I really want to leave you with this one. This is one of the statistics that I'm sure you are very familiar with. 71% of pregnant teenagers lack a father. I am going to shout when we get off this call on how important you, John Miles, and myself are. We are the answer, Doc. And the healthier we become, the better this situation will get. So fighting for fatherhood is what I want to do. It's what we must do. And that's just a small, it's a huge, but it's a small beginning that we begin to understand how we value each other. You gave me a lot of information. I will be editing forever. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
I wish. Well, this is how a relationship started. You're a master at that. So I thank you so much for the opportunity I know I went in, but I thank you for the opportunity to come on this show. I wish I had more time to talk about HOTEP Christian Services and the work we do with African-American males. Our nonprofit is devoted to community mental health services with families and African-American males. And so when people get off kilter, in other words, when they need help, we're there for them, providing mental health services with an Afrocentric focus, a Christian foundation, and best practices, clinical best practices in mental health services. And so I wish we could talk about that at another time. I'm so glad that you're taking each day to talk about fatherhood, the importance of fatherhood. This movement right now is the new normal. When white folks can feel the pain of a black folk dying, and we have a Boston Tea Party going right now, things are going to change for black men in America. And we need to, as black men, what we can do is to take back responsibility of our sons and our daughters, and we can be in their lives, because we affect the sons, we affect the daughters just as much as we affect the sons.
Yes, we do.
In our absence. And they need to know that you love them, and they need the money, they need the resources to grow up in this society, and we got to find ways to help rebuild those relationships. And the first thing it starts with is rebuilding the men, because most black men who have made a mistake or they weren't there at this point, they get guilty and then they step away. And so we have to rebuild the psyches of the men. And that's why if you have some children and you're not in contact with them and you're not connected to them, once they get past 15, 16, it's hard. If you can get before 10 years old, get to those kids and build a relationship, then that's when they need you. And that's when it's good to go get some mental health help, so that you can wrap your mind around being humble enough to go back in there to those children, tell them how much you love them, repent for whatever mistake it is, and get involved in their life and help them walk through life.
And that,
my name is Dr. Ural. I thank
you. That's how you close it out. We will be talking about HOTEP on the third Monday, the 15th or 16th, whatever that is, with Paul Posey. We will be talking about that. And most definitely, I appreciate my brother John for sticking in and listening and being supportive. And once again, thank you. This is the beginning of Fatherhood Unity Month, brought to you by Campaign for Black Male Achievement, Good Fathers Only, and the Daddy Talk Podcast. With that, gentlemen, God bless you. Oh, and here's a chance. I love you, Dominique. I love you, Cameron. I love you, Keith. And I love you, Two Man.
Amen. I love you, Chris. I love you, Andrew. I love you, Megan. I love you, Michael Underwood. And I love you, Christopher Crowder Barnes. Those are my 4 sons and my daughter. God bless you. Thank you. That's it. I appreciate it. All right, Brother John Miles. Peace.